The moon hung high, silver and endless, its glow spilling across the sleeping forest. Wolves lifted their muzzles in reverence, voices weaving together in a hymn to the goddess who had blessed their kind with strength, speed, and the sacred gift of shifting. But not all blessings were equal. From the moment Lyra drew her first breath, whispers had followed her. She had been small, fragile, a pup with no spark of power in her veins. The midwives searched her eyes for the golden gleam of the wolf within, and found nothing but a soft, human gray. "She has no wolf," someone murmured, the words slicing through the air like a curse. That whisper grew into a story, and the story became her name, Weakling. Years passed, but nothing changed. While other children shifted with awkward paws and eager snarls, Lyra remained in her human skin. She learned to walk behind them, head bowed, carrying the sting of laughter in her chest. Every stumble, every failure became proof of her curse. Still, she endured. She ran errands for elders, fetched water from the river, stitched wounds when hunters returned bloodied. Her hands were steady, her heart resilient, but it never seemed to matter. Power was the only currency her world respected, and she had none. At night, when the forest fell silent, she would sit at the edge of the tree line, staring at the moon. "Why me?" she would ask, though her lips never dared form the words aloud. The moon goddess answered only with silence. Once, when she was 10, her brother shoved her into the dirt before the pack house. "You'll never shift," he sneered, while others laughed. "You'll always be nothing." That night she cried herself to sleep, her small body curled beneath thin blankets, the laughter of her pack echoing in her dreams. And yet, beneath her sorrow, something else stirred. It wasn't a wolf, not yet. It was a pulse, deep in her chest, faint but steady, a whisper too soft to name. Years later, when she turned 18, the whispers had not stopped. If anything, they grew sharper, more venomous. The weakling girl was now a woman, still wolfless, still mocked. Her presence at ceremonies was tolerated, not celebrated. She existed at the edge of the firelight, watching others bask in glory. But the moon saw her. The moon always saw her, and though the pack could not, the night sky carried her secret, hidden like embers buried in ash. For one day, when the world least expected it, those embers would ignite, and the weakling would burn brighter than them all. The night after the ceremony, the pack house was alive with laughter. Music drifted from the great hall, where wolves feasted and boasted of their strength. But Lyra lingered in the shadows of the corridor, balancing a tray of empty goblets, her head bowed so no one would notice the heat rising in her cheeks. She didn't belong among them. She never had. Her steps slowed as she passed the open archway of the dining hall. Torchlight spilled across the stone floor along with voices, sharp, cutting voices that twisted around her like thorns. She should have been banished years ago. She'll never find a mate. No wolf would tie himself to a cripple. Can you imagine her standing before the Alpha King? He'd laugh her out of the hall. The words were laced with mockery, punctuated by bursts of cruel laughter. Lyra's chest tightened. She pressed herself against the cold wall, gripping the tray so tightly her knuckles blanched. She told herself to walk away, to keep moving before their words carved deeper, but she couldn't. She stood frozen, listening as they stripped her dignity piece by piece. "She dreams too much," that one. Another voice scoffed. "Always staring at the moon as if it'll save her." A different wolf chuckled darkly. "Maybe she thinks she's special, but the goddess abandoned her the moment she was born." The tray trembled in her hands. She bit her lip until it bled, willing herself not to cry, not hear where any sound might betray her. For years, she had lived in the shadows of such whispers. They haunted her in daylight and in dreams, echoing louder than her own heartbeat. Yet tonight, something inside her rebelled. She wasn't special, no. She wasn't powerful, not yet, but she had dreams and they were hers alone. One day, she thought, her jaw tightening as tears stung her eyes, "I will leave this place. I will find a world where no one calls me weak." The voices inside the hall rose in drunken cheer, oblivious to the vow she whispered to herself. Slowly, she turned and slipped down the corridor, her footsteps swallowed by silence. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around her as she stepped into the courtyard. Above her, the moon glowed like a silent guardian, and she raised her gaze to it. Someday, she breathed, a fragile promise carried on the wind. Someday they'll see me. The shadows answered only with silence, but the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if the night itself had heard her vow. The morning broke with tension in the air, the kind that made even the forest still. By midday, every wolf in the pack was gathered near the great gates, their voices hushed, their postures rigid. Word had spread swiftly, carried like wildfire on the wind. The Alpha King was coming. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind the taller wolves. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her simple dress, the fabric worn thin. She wasn't supposed to be here. Weaklings had no place in royal welcomes, but she couldn't stop herself. Curiosity tugged her forward, stronger than fear. The ground shuddered with the thunder of hooves long before the riders appeared. And then they came, cloaked in black and silver, their wolves massive and gleaming, eyes glowing like molten gold. At their head rode a man who seemed carved from shadow and flame. Kale, the Alpha King, his presence alone silenced the murmurs. Broad, shouldered, and impossibly tall, he carried the weight of dominance like a second skin. His dark hair caught the sun, and his eyes, piercing, unrelenting, swept across the pack like a blade. No one dared meet his gaze for long. No one, except Lyra. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. His eyes locked on her, cutting through the sea of faces as if no one else existed. Heat surged up her throat, and she dropped her gaze instantly, her heart racing. Why is he looking at me? The Alpha King dismounted, his boots striking the earth with a quiet authority. He exchanged words with her pack's alpha, but Lyra heard none of it. All she could feel was the weight of his stare, like a hand pressed against her skin. Wolves whispered around her, voices sharp with curiosity. Did you see that? He looked at her. No. Why would he? She's nothing. Lyra's ears burned. She edged backward into the crowd, wishing she could sink into the earth. It had to be a mistake, a trick of her imagination. There was no reason a king would notice her, and yet, when she risked a glance upward, his eyes found hers again. The breath left her lungs in a rush. Something primal stirred at the base of her spine, a shiver that didn't belong to fear alone. Then, without warning, Kale turned away, his face unreadable. The spell shattered, leaving her trembling in his wake. Still, the question clung to her like a brand, burning hotter with every heartbeat. Why had the Alpha King, out of all the powerful wolves gathered here, looked at her? The pack grounds were alive with anticipation that night. Torches lined the training field, their flames flickering against the velvet dark. The air thrummed with energy as wolves gathered in a vast circle, ready to display their strength before the visiting king. Lyra kept to the farthest edge, the shadows her only shield. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, wishing she could vanish into the night. These ceremonies were meant to inspire aught-approved dominance, loyalty, power. She had none of those things. Line them up. Her alpha commanded, voice booming across the field. Warriors stepped forward proudly, some already shifting with bones cracking and fur erupting in brilliant shades of silver, brown, and black. Their howls shook the trees. The crowd roared in approval. One by one, the strongest wolves leapt into the ring, showing their claws, their teeth, their control. Some sparred fiercely, their snarls echoing under the moonlight. Others shifted back to human form with practiced ease, sweat glistening on their bare skin. Every display ended with cheers and pride. Then her name was called. Lyra froze. The air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. No, she whispered under her breath, her voice lost in the crowd. Please, not me. But there was no escape. Eyes turned toward her, dozens of them, filled with scornful expectation. A ripple of mocking laughter spread through the ring. The weakling, someone scoffed. What strength could she possibly show? Her legs trembled as she stepped forward, each movement dragging like iron chains. The dirt beneath her feet felt unsteady, and the torches seemed to burn hotter, harsher, as if the fire itself mocked her. Across the field, Kale stood with arms crossed, expression unreadable. His gaze followed her, cool and unwavering. Lyra swallowed hard, her heart hammering against her ribs. She tried, she begged, for the wolf inside her to answer, for any spark of the beast she had never felt. Her body strained, but nothing came. No growl, no shift, no claws, only silence. The whispers began first, then the laughter. It spread quickly, a wave crashing over her fragile hope. Pathetic, useless, she should never have been called. Lyra's cheeks burned, tears threatening to rise. She forced them back, biting her lip until she tasted blood. She wouldn't give them more reason to mock her. Still, the humiliation cut deeper than any blade, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling of Cale's eyes on her. Not pity, not mockery, something else, something sharper. She dared not meet his gaze again, but she felt it. The weight of it pressed into her bones, pulling her down and holding her up all at once. As the laughter swelled and her alpha turned away in disappointment, Lyra's heart whispered a truth she could not ignore. This was only the beginning. The field had never felt so vast, nor the crowd so merciless. Lyra stood trembling in the torchlight, every eye fixed on her, every sneer like a dagger to her skin. The laughter rolled over her in cruel waves, a chorus of voices that stripped her bare. Shift, weakling, someone jeered. Show the Alpha King what a disgrace you are. Her throat closed. She truly tried, to summon something from within. Heat flushed her veins, her body arching as if reaching for a spark that wasn't there. But no claws tore through her skin, no fur burst across her body. There was nothing, only silence. Her Alpha's voice thundered across the field. Enough. His tone held no defense, no mercy, only disappointment. Step back, girl, you shame us all. The laughter rose again, sharper this time, cruel and triumphant. Wolves nudged each other, smirking at her humiliation. Some even turned away, unable to look at the pitiful creature who dared stand in the ring. Her stomach twisted, but she stood frozen, rooted to the earth like a tree battered by storm winds. Then, his voice, wait. It was deep, commanding, cutting through the noise like a blade. The laughter died instantly. The air shifted. Every wolf turned, bowing their heads in instinctive deference. The Alpha King had spoken. Cale stepped forward from the shadows, his presence overwhelming the field. His eyes glowed faintly, an otherworldly light beneath the torch flames, and when they landed on Lyra, her breath caught. He studied her in silence, his expression impossible to read, but there was no laughter in his gaze. No disdain, only a dangerous, unreadable intensity. The crowd held its breath. Wolves glanced at one another in confusion. Why would the king waste his time on her? Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to look away to hide, but his gaze anchored her in place. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The torchlight, the stillness, the silent question in his eyes. Then, with a flicker of movement, Cale's lips curved into the faintest, coldest smirk. Interesting, he murmured, though his voice carried easily across the hush. The single word rattled through her, sparking a fire she didn't understand. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispering, but Cale had already turned away, his attention settling back on the pack's alpha. The moment was over, and yet the damage was done. The humiliation still burned in her chest, but now it tangled with something else, something hotter, more dangerous, a feeling she couldn't name. As she slipped back into the shadows, the sting of laughter still echoing in her ears, Lyra knew one truth with terrifying clarity. The Alpha King had noticed her, and that could destroy everything. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Lyra was summoned to the council chamber. Her stomach churned with dread, the memory of last night's humiliation still burning her cheeks. She walked with measured steps, but each footfall felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself were trying to warn her. Inside, the pack's elders sat in judgment, their eyes sharp and unforgiving. Even her own family cast looks of disappointment, masking embarrassment as they nodded along with the ritual's grim decorum. Lyra, a deep voice began, steady and unyielding, you have failed in the ceremony of strength. You have no wolf, no power, no merit to stand among us as a mate or warrior. The pack cannot tolerate weakness. Her heart thudded in her chest. She had expected this. The rejection was carved into her very life, a certainty she could neither avoid nor soften. You are hereby marked as unworthy, the elder pronounced, lifting a ceremonial rod etched with silver glyphs. From this day forward, you are no longer considered for pairing within the pack. Lyra's knees threatened to buckle. The words struck harder than any blow, a public branding of everything she had feared, everything she had struggled against her entire life. Then a shift in the room. The door swung open and Cale entered, his boots silent on the polished floor. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Enough. The elders froze, their gazes snapping to him. The tension in the chamber was electric, a storm just beneath the skin. Cale's eyes landed on Lyra. His wolf growled softly in his mind, a sound she could feel rather than hear. Low, possessive, warning anyone who dared question his presence. The moon never gives without reason. He said, his voice calm but edged with iron. Do not mistake what you see as the end of her story. Lyra blinked, confusion and awe tangling in her chest. His words were a bomb and a spark, igniting something inside her that had been dormant for years. The elders murmured uneasily, but Cale's presence demanded obedience. Even they dared not argue. You will watch her, he said to the council. Do not judge by what you see. Some powers awaken slowly, and some wolves are more than they appear. He stepped closer to Lyra, his gaze locking on hers. Heat surged through her body, her pulse accelerating as if her very blood recognized the command in his voice. Then he turned, leaving as abruptly as he had arrived, the echo of his footsteps still vibrating in the chamber. Lyra sank to the floor the moment the door closed, her body trembling, not from weakness, but from the electric charge of destiny brushing against her skin. She had been branded unworthy, rejected by her pack. Humiliated in front of everyone she knew, and yet, for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the world had been waiting for her all along. Night fell like a velvet curtain, the moon slicing silver across the forest. Lyra lay on the thin mattress in her small room, the events of the day replaying in sharp, unforgiving detail. The laughter, the rejection, the cold weight of the mark, all of it pressed against her chest like iron. She wanted to sleep, but exhaustion brought only a restless stirring beneath her skin. Her heartbeat drummed louder than the crickets outside, and then the dreams came. First, there was fire. Not the fire of a hearth, but silver flames that danced along her arms and legs, curling around her as if alive. Her body arched, instinct pulling her into shapes she had never known, movements she could not name. She felt claws beneath her fingers, fur along her spine, and a power that made her tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. A voice whispered, soft as the wind through the pines, calling her name, Lyra. Lyra, she tried to answer, but her lips were sealed. Her wolf, or whatever dwelled within her, clawed at the edges of her consciousness, desperate to be free. Then came the silver eyes. They were hers, yet not hers. They glowed with the intensity of the full moon, staring into the world with feral certainty. She felt the pulse of the forest in her bones, the heartbeat of the night syncing with her own. She awoke with a gasp, sweat dampening her hair. Her heart thundered as if it wanted to escape. The room was dark and still, the wind whispering through the trees outside, but the echo of the dream clung to her. Her body ached, not from the physical exertion she had done today, but from something deeper, something primal awakening. What is happening to me? She whispered into the empty room. The answer came not in words, but in a shiver that ran through her spine, in the tingling heat in her hands, and in the undeniable certainty that she was no longer just the weak girl everyone had written off. For the first time, Lyra felt something stir that no pack, no elder, no humiliation could snuff out. Something dangerous, something magnificent, something that might finally claim her as its own. Outside, the moon blazed high and cold, bathing the forest in silver light. And somewhere deep in the night, the whisper returned, "Your time is coming, Lyra. Your wolf waits." She clutched the thin blanket to her chest, breath ragged, knowing instinctively that the dream was not a warning. It was a promise. The weakling she had always been was gone, and whatever was sleeping inside her was beginning to stir. The forest smelled of pine and frost as Lyra crept along the narrow trail, her breath rising in trembling clouds. She had avoided the pack house all day, retreating to the outskirts where the snow muffled her steps and no one could mock her. Yet no matter how far she ran, she could feel it, his presence, Cale. She had tried to push his image from her mind, tried to convince herself that a king like him could never care for a weakling, a wolfless girl, but the memory of his gaze at the ceremony, sharp and unreadable, burned like fire behind her eyelids. "You shouldn't be out here." A voice rumbled from the shadows, her head snapped up. There he was, towering, dark, every inch the alpha king she had feared and yet felt inexplicably drawn to. His wolf growled softly in her mind, low and warning, protective and feral. I wasn't," she stammered, trying to regain composure. Her voice sounded small, weak even to herself. "You shouldn't hide," Cale said, stepping closer. The scent of his wolf pressed against her, sharp, magnetic, almost too much to bear. "You shouldn't pretend you are nothing." Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to step back, to flee, yet her feet refused. The pull between them was undeniable, unnatural. She could feel it in her bones, in her pulse, in the quickening thrum of her heart. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I'm nothing. I have no wolf. I'm not meant for someone like you." Cale's lips curved in a faint, almost cruel smirk. "The wolf doesn't always awaken when you expect, and the mate bond. It doesn't obey reason." Her breath caught. The words ignited something in her, a dangerous curiosity, a fear, a longing. She had heard of mates, of bonds that tied wolves together for life. But Cale, the Alpha King, how could a bond like that even exist between them? You feel it too," she said, her voice barely a whisper, eyes wide. "Yes," he admitted, his jaw tight, wolf growling beneath the surface, "and I don't want it. I shouldn't want it, but the bond, it pulls me to you whether I fight or not." Lyra's heart thundered. The air between them crackled, alive with heat and tension. His hand brushed hers, not a touch, not quite, but close enough to make her pulse race and her breath catch. Cale's gaze darkened. He leaned closer, almost daring, almost claiming, but then he pulled back, leaving only the promise of fire behind. "You will have to control it," he said, his voice low, commanding, "because neither of us is ready for what it means." Lyra swallowed, trembling. The forest was silent around them, but inside her chest a storm raged. She knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The bond had chosen them, and neither of them could escape it. The forest had never felt so heavy. Lyra moved cautiously through the underbrush, senses alert. The snow crunched softly underfoot, masking her trail, but the prickling unease along her spine told her it wasn't enough. Hunters were near. Not just any hunters. Rogues who preyed on wolfless packs, seeking the weak, the outcasts, the easy targets. Rumors had spread that someone in her pack was vulnerable, and Lyra knew, with an icy certainty, that meant her. Her pulse quickened. Every shadow in the trees seemed alive, every whisper of wind a warning. She had never felt so exposed. Then, as if summoned by fear itself, a branch snapped behind her. Lyra whirled, fists clenched, ready to run, ready to fight, though she knew she was unarmed and powerless. "Relax," a deep voice rumbled beside her. She froze, recognizing the scent, the oricale. His presence was overwhelming, wolf power radiating like heat. Even unshifted, he exuded dominance, control, and lethal potential. "You don't understand," she breathed. "They'll kill me. You're not nothing." Cale interrupted sharply, his amber eyes flashing like fire in the snow. "And no one will touch you while I'm here." Before she could respond, a rustle of movement signaled approaching danger. Shadowy forms slipped between the trees, arrows notched, teeth bared, wolves snarling with hunger for prey. Lyra's stomach dropped. This was real. Death was near. Cale stepped in front of her, shifting almost imperceptibly. A low growl vibrated through him, warning, commanding. His eyes glimmered gold, his fangs bared, and the hunters faltered, sensing the presence of an alpha unmatched. "Go," Cale ordered, his voice both a command and a promise. "Stay behind me." Lyra obeyed instinctively, pressed against his back as he moved forward with lethal grace. His wolf flared in the clearing, massive and glowing under the moonlight. The attackers hesitated, their confidence crumbling before the force of his presence. But even as they retreated, Lyra felt something else. An awakening inside her chest, a thrum she hadn't recognized before. The bond with Cale pulsed, a tether of strength, of power, of destiny. Her heartbeat echoed his, her senses sharpening, her body trembling with the call of the wolf she had never truly met. When the hunters finally vanished into the night, Cale turned to her, expression dark but unreadable. "You felt it, didn't you?" he asked softly, almost a whisper meant only for her. Lyra nodded, awestruck, chest still hammering. I think I did." Kale's hand brushed hers for a fleeting moment. Then you're beginning to understand. Your wolf is not gone, Lyra. It's waiting, and so is your bond with me. The wind rustled the trees around them, carrying the lingering threat of hunters and the promise of something far more dangerous, her awakening and their connection. For the first time, Lyra realized her weakness was a lie, and survival alone would not be enough. The forest was silent except for the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet. Lyra followed Kale deeper into the clearing, heart racing with a mix of fear, anticipation, and something unspoken she refused to name. The hunters had retreated, but their presence had changed everything. She was no longer just the weakling. She was a target, and survival demanded more than hiding. "Stop thinking like a helpless girl," Kale said, his voice low, commanding. "You have strength, Lyra. You just don't know how to use it." Her chest tightened. I'm not ready." He turned, amber eyes blazing, wolf growling faintly beneath his skin. "You'll never be ready if you wait for someone else to decide. Your wolf is inside you, waiting. It's time to wake it." Lyra swallowed hard, the weight of the truth pressing against her. For years she had believed she was nothing, but standing here, beneath the towering pines, beside the Alpha King, she felt a spark, a trembling ember she had ignored for too long. Kale stepped closer, his presence magnetic, overwhelming. "Follow my lead," he instructed. "Don't fight it. Feel it. Let your senses guide you." The training began. Kale pushed her to her limits. Her legs burned, her arms ached, and sweat soaked through her clothes. But with each movement, each exercise, something inside her responded. Her senses sharpened. The rustle of the wind became a map. The scent of pine and snow and predator alike etched into her mind. Her body moved faster, sharper, instinctively. "Good," Kale said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. "You're learning, faster than I expected." Lyra's pulse raced, not just from exertion but from the closeness of him, the heat of his presence, the tension between them. Every time their hands brushed as he corrected her stance, a jolt of energy surged through her, a dangerous and thrilling awareness of the bond they shared. Then it happened. A flicker beneath her skin, a twitch of energy, a spark of fur and claw that she barely controlled. Her chest heaved as her vision sharpened, senses flaring beyond normal human limits. She staggered, breathless but exhilarated. Kale's eyes darkened with intensity. "You're not weak," he murmured, stepping closer. "You're just beginning, and when you fully awaken." His words trailed off, but his gaze promised fire, danger, and something neither of them could yet name. Lyra's body trembled, not from exhaustion, but from power, from recognition, from the undeniable pull of the bond between them. The night deepened around them, shadows stretching, wind whispering, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Her wolf was stirring, and Kale, he would not let her go. The night sky burned red. The blood moon hung heavy over the forest, casting a crimson glow that painted every tree, every shadow in fire. Lyra stood at the center of the clearing, her body trembling, senses screaming, heart pounding like a drum of war. Tonight, everything would change. Kale stood beside her, his presence a solid, unyielding force. His wolf growled faintly beneath the surface, muscles coiled, amber eyes glowing. He had brought her here for this moment, this one chance to awaken the power that had long been hidden within her. "Focus," he whispered, voice low, carrying the weight of command and something softer, more dangerous. "Trust yourself. Trust what is inside you." Lyra closed her eyes, inhaling the sharp scent of pine and frost, the metallic tang of blood in the air. The whispers of the forest seeped into her skin. She felt heat coil within her chest, energy she could no longer ignore. Her wolf pulsed, a living thing demanding to be born. She cried out, not in fear, but in release. Light flared beneath her skin, silver and red flames swirling, fur erupting across her body as claws tore from her fingers. Her eyes shot open, glowing with lunar fire, and the forest seemed to inhale in awe. The pack froze, torches shaking in trembling hands, mouths agape. Wolves who had mocked her, laughed at her weakness, stumbled back in disbelief. Lyra had become a force they had never imagined. beautiful, terrifying, unstoppable. Cale stepped forward, his gaze locking on her, voice low and husky. "Lyra, you're not weak. You've never been weak. You're mine." The words sent a shiver through her, igniting something primal in her chest. Her wolf roared in response, echoing across the trees, the sound pure and wild, claiming the night. The connection between them flared, bond and power intertwining, dangerous and irresistible. Lyra's senses were on fire. She could hear the pack's hearts, smell the crisp winter air, feel the ground beneath her as if it were an extension of herself. Every nerve hummed with life, every breath a surge of strength she had never known. The laughter, the mockery, the rejection, it all shattered like glass under the power of her awakening. The weak girl no one had believed in had risen, blazing brighter than anyone could imagine. Cale's hand brushed hers, instinctively protective, possessive. The bond between them pulsed with heat, with promise, with inevitability. Lyra lifted her head to the crimson sky, letting out a howl that shook the forest, calling her wolf fully into being, staking her claim. The pack watched, stunned, as the girl they had written off as powerless became a creature of moonlit fire, fierce and untamed, and beside her, the Alpha King knew nothing would ever be the same. The clearing was silent, the forest holding its breath. The blood moon still hung high, bathing the world in a haunting crimson light. Lyra's fur shimmered silver and red, her eyes blazing with the power of her wolf, a creature the pack had never imagined, a force no one could ignore. Whispers rippled through the pack. Wolves who had mocked her, laughed at her, branded her weak. They all stared in disbelief. Mothers clutched their pups, elders exchanged stunned glances, and the warriors shifted uneasily. The girl who had been nothing was now everything, unstoppable, radiant, and terrifying. Cale stepped forward, his boots silent against the snow-crusted ground. The Alpha King's presence alone silenced the murmurs, his amber eyes fixed on her with a dangerous intensity. His wolf rumbled low in his chest, possessive and commanding, matching the fierce pulse of her own. "Lyra," he said, voice carrying across the assembly, calm yet unyielding, "this ends now." Her breath caught, heart hammering. She had expected awe, perhaps fear, but not this raw, undeniable claim. Cale raised his hand not in threat, but in recognition, in dominance, in destiny. The moon chose her, he announced, eyes scanning the pack. "She is not weak, she is not to be questioned. Lyra is mine." Gasps echoed through the clearing. Some wolves bowed their heads, instinctively submitting. Others froze in shock. Her family stared, mouths agape, unable to deny what they saw. The prophecy, whispered through the generations, had been fulfilled before their very eyes. Lyra's wolf surged with exhilaration, wild and untamed, yet she felt something else, a calm, a tether to Cale, a heartbeat she had never known but recognized instantly. She stepped forward, letting the bond pull her closer, and for the first time, fear and doubt melted away. Cale closed the distance between them, their hands brushing, their eyes locking. He lowered his lips to hers, not fully, but enough to promise fire, protection, and eternity. "You are my mate," he murmured, possessive, tender, commanding, "and I will never let you go." Lyra's chest swelled, tears streaking her fur. "I'm yours," she whispered back, finally embracing the truth she had always denied. Her wolf howled in response, echoing across the forest, a declaration of claim and power. The pack watched in stunned silence, and then, slowly, a murmur of acceptance spread. Even those who had doubted her strength could no longer deny it. Lyra, once humiliated and rejected, now stood as a queen beside the Alpha King, radiant and unstoppable. The moon blazed above them, casting silver fire across the pair. For Lyra, the weak girl of yesterday was gone. She had risen, claimed by destiny and by the Alpha, who had seen her true power all along. And together, bonded, they would rule, not as ruler and subject, but as mates, partners, and equals. The forest exhaled, the pack bowed, and the blood moon witnessed the beginning of a legend. The girl who was never weak, standing proud, unbroken, and undeniably claimed.